The Sporlan division of Parker Hannifin Corporation is sponsoring this podcast. Sporlan is the leading manufacturer of HVAC and R components. Using quality materials and craftsmanship, Sporlan maintains a commitment to innovation, manufacturing excellence, service, and support for its customers since 1934. The company is known for its catch-all filter dryers, thermostatic expansion valves, solenoid valves, pressure regulating valves, suction filters, electric valves, controllers, supermarket monitoring solutions, chemicals, smart service tools, Zoom Lock Max, press to connect, and Zoom Lock Push to connect refrigerant fittings. If folks want to learn more, what do they do?
You can go to sporlan.com.
I guess that's Jim and John for Sporlan signing off.
This episode is sponsored by United Refrigeration and Westermeyer Industries, revolutionizing your HVACR experience. Visit URI.com for all your HVACR needs, offering real-time inventory, personalized pricing, and a nearby stock feature. Access quick pick replacement parts and branch details effortlessly. With 350 plus fully stocked locations across North America, our knowledgeable staff are ready to assist with the solutions you need. Exclusive offer. Use code ARPOD on URI.com to get a $10 gift card when purchasing the Westermeyer oil float, part number W4300-38F. These high-performance floats are not just compatible with their own oil separators, but also available as a crossover model, conveniently stocked at United Refrigeration. That's code ARPOD to claim your $10 gift card. Visit URI.com now.
There he goes. Worked that time. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Advanced Refrigeration Podcast. You're the host, Brett Wetzel and Kevin Compass.
What's up?
How are we doing, Woody Allen? Or not Woody. Woody Harrelson. Woody Harrelson.
Living life.
Yeah.
Loving life, maybe.
What were you doing today?
Today, I was unloading a EMS job that I really don't want to do.
Unloading?
I was unloading the truck into the store that is just dirty. Rack room is dirty. So just looking forward to this one. I'm going to be looking at a diesel mechanic every day, changing controls out.
What are you changing? What to what?
Yeah, CPC to Danfoss. Yeah. Some CPC overlay to Danfoss.
Is it the old reflex controller or what?
No, it's E2.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's E2.
I was just curious. I didn't know if it was a thing that rhymes with Balbertons, where they they have all the
Yep.
What's the old controller? The EIL. The ones down by us, we have all that EIL stuff.
I don't even know what that is.
EIL was what I guess Danfoss was before it was Danfoss. Before they came with the AK or AK-55 or something like that. It was a different company. That's where Yoder came from.
Before the Dutch came in?
Yeah, before the Dutch came in. Before the wooden shoes came in. No, but it was EIL. That you ever see there's a how like on Danfoss there's that sensor replacement. It's like a kit. It's like kit something that basically converts a Danfoss sensor to a CPC sensor. Jesus, tap dancing. So it switches the resistance around. They have another one for the EIL where you actually have to power a resistor in order to make it work. So you'll see one red wire connected to four resistors, and then each one of those resistors have to be landed on one of the inputs for the sensors. So if you were to convert it to regular Danfoss.
Oh, I know which ones you're talking about. People are just hammering the shit out of your roof.
You know, they were quiet all day until they moved up to the front. I'm having my roof done today, as you can tell. It's going to be a fun one to edit. So besides going to be looking like a diesel mechanic, what else are you going to be up to?
Oh, no. Then I walked to Costco that I do want to do. So those change outs are a little more fun.
Is that the CPC, the microthermal?
Yeah. enjoy those ones much more. They're much higher paced, but they're just, to me, easier in general.
You don't have to change out all the case temperature sensors.
They change out shit.
Oh,
I
that's
don't
what I'm
change
saying.
out transducers. I don't change out case temperature sensors. I do change out transducers, but I don't have to. It's just an all-around easier switch out. The boards are gigantic, but other than that, I enjoy those ones. Like, they're a lot better jobs. They go a lot smoother for the most part. But yeah, so we were doing that, and then just dealing with the plethora of disasters that keep popping up between racks blowing discharge valves, and then yesterday I had to change the EB and PAPS motor, and I had to rope it up the side of a building. Those are just a treat.
You see the check valve that I literally just posted like
I know.
5
I seen
minutes
it.
ago.
I seen it this morning. So another one of those. I don't know if they're how to say it. If it's Impreto or they're Italian. And
Invisalign or something like that. I don't know.
They are not up to that Italian quality from whatever car or whatever else they make, because that is like the fourth one I know in the last 2 weeks that have split. So if you got brass check valves and there's stubs with copper on them, just be on the lookout, because they're splitting all over the place. And the welds are all undercut. If you look at the brass weld where they tigged it in there, every one of them's undercut, meaning like there's a groove. There, you can catch the edge of your finger going on the weld where it meets the body. I wouldn't even start it up if I seen one that was like that at this point. And they all passed the pressure test. They didn't blow till there was heat and vibration. So that's one thing to keep an eye on.
I'm sorry that they're still hammering like hell. I'm looking for something.
Yeah, so it's you freeze.
I keep muting because, like I said, I guess they decide to go to the front of the house this afternoon. So they weren't. I was cooking dinner. That's why I didn't get on there right away. I was cooking steak and French fries for the kids, and then I was like, okay, time to record. I gotta go. And I was like, oh, great. And I get in here, and you're like, what's that? I'm like, that's them hammering away.
Yeah, so that's that check valve, and it's that same brass style. And for me, it's been the 1.3" every time. And I'm pretty sure his was an 1.3" also.
It looks that way, doesn't it? It's pretty damn big.
No, it's the 1.3" ones where it is. And Brad, take your pointer, put it back on there. So the weld right at the back, so on the body.
Oh, right there.
There's where it leaks every time, because the weld's undercut, and they must have a robot doing it, and it must be spiral welding it on a table, and it's like putting no filler rod on it. Obviously, there's a plethora of these, so just be aware.
And like you said, like you had that one rack where you started up and then nothing, and then what? Like literally a little bit later, right?
My brother made it 2 tanks, and it blew the charge.
Awesome.
He had 2 tanks of liquid into the flash tank, feed into the liquid line, and it blew the charge at like 650 pounds.
I did have something to tell you. I actually, there was a Greg's brother, I guess you want to call him that now. We can call him Greggy's brother, was starting up a rack, and one of the manufacturers put a 635 relief on the low temp compressors. He's like, yeah, it was gasket day today. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, man, that relief didn't blow until the suction pressure got up to whatever, because usually you have like 435 on there. And he's like, dude, there was CO2 coming out of all the bolts on that subcritical compressor. I don't know if you've ever seen that happen before. Yes? No? Maybe so.
No, but I've seen gas blow out everywhere.
From
Gaskets, I've seen guys crack fucking service valves tightening gaskets down.
Oh, no, but this was just surely because there was a failure on the rack, and the relief did not blow until it hit 635 or whatever it was.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that before.
So before you're doing the startup, just make sure you're checking those reliefs, making sure you have the right ones on there.
All right, let's start this. What are we doing?
Yeah.
What are we talking about?
Yeah, so someone called me a couple weeks back, and this was actually, we've talked about this many a time, where he talked about what having the right spec on the case and on the evaporator is going to do. And so first I'm going to go through this real quick and then explain a little bit of sizing stuff. So if you look at, this is a model number for, I I think it's a Heatcraft something or other. Doesn't really matter because the theory still holds the same. So this is the low profile guy that everyone loves that usually just ices up on the one side. So coming down here, let me zoom in here a little bit.
I'm convinced low profile coils are the devil.
Why?
Because they have nothing but problems. They have more problems than any other coil out there.
Okay, fair enough. But there's a reason for that though. I'm
Terrible
a
design.
as you would say, I'm a proponent of 6 to 8 degrees of superheat for 99% of the coils out there, except for this guy. If you call Heatcraft or Bone, whatever you want to call them, they'll tell you that those low pros need, just like the bunker cases, those need 3 to 5 degrees of superheat. Okay. And I'll explain why here in a minute after I explain this little bit of sizing thing. As you can see, you have 10 degrees here on.
You're not showing anything.
I do this on meetings all day long, and I start explaining shit, and then no one says anything until whatever, and they're like, "Oh, you're not sharing." I'm like, "Awesome."
Probably because your eyes are rolling back in your head.
Shut up. Probably because I'm not even looking at the screen. Yes. So anyway, for an example, so we have this TLC 134 slotted for 13,400 BTU. So theoretically, when this is at a 10 degree TD, so 10 degrees difference between the saturated and the box temperature. So we can assume the box temperature is set for 35 degrees. That being said, if you have an EPR and someone's like, I'm just going to make it colder and just turn the pressure down. When you do that, let's slide on over to here. So if you go down to a 15 degree TD on that same coil, now that same coil, because you drop the pressure down 5 more degrees saturated than what it was anticipated for, is now at 20,100 BTUs. So if we keep following that down, if you run that SST all the way down, where now you have 20 degree TD, basically the coil is going to double in size. And that's what it changes. It actually changes the coil size. Sometimes you'll see this on a low temp circuit that, for the meat boxes that are usually piped into the low temp header. It's medium temp box, low temp header. And so the EPRs are typically stupid. So what do? They open up 100% after a defrost. And now your suction pressure is all the way down to minus 20. So if you were intended to have a 20 degree coil, and now you're going all the way down to negative 20, now instead of having a 10 degree TD, now we have like 40 or 50 degree TD. Usually for every 10 degrees, you double the size of the capacity of the coil. So if we had this coil right here, a TLC 108, that's 10,800 BTUs. You multiply that by 5 times that amount. Now we have 50 some odd thousand of BTUs for that coil. But what hasn't changed size is the expansion valve. The expansion valve hasn't changed size. So this is something you have to watch out, especially on these single units, right? So I had someone send me these pictures.
It was the worst. The Bullseye store. Dry ambient room on the rack.
Yes. Yep. And actually, the way that I actually figured this out the one day, I had a produce, that same area where you're talking about where they have like the onions and the potatoes and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I thought the expansion valve was bad. So I changed out the expansion valve and I changed it out for whatever the coil said. So let's just say it was a 1,000 or 10,000 BTU unit. I ended up putting a 1-ton cartridge in there.
Not even close.
Exactly. Because it has like a 20 or 30 degree TD. And I'm like, what the hell? Like it's still bad. But then if you look at the refrigeration schedule, it'll say, okay, it's a 10,000 BTU coil, but it actually has a 30,000 BTU expansion valve in there. So that's where this comes into play. So these pictures were sent to me. This is from a cat out in your neck of the woods, out in good old Indiana. And the guy's like, just started this up yesterday, and now it's messed up. And so he said he had good superheat yesterday. I still don't trust anyone. So he sent me, I wanted pictures. So he sent me this side of the coil, and then he sent me that, and then he sent me this. And usually what that means is that it's not feeding evenly. So if you look at the distributor, like it's iced up way too far back. It's usually supposed to just be iced like right here at the tip. And then you can see that the bottom distributor tubes are going over to that side over there, which is that side of the coil. So that one's, lower on the distributor. And then those ones at the top are obviously higher, so they're not getting as much liquid. So if you don't have enough liquid feeding in the expansion valve, it's going to go the path of least resistance, which happens to always be over where the expansion valve and the suction line and liquid line enter.
So you know an easy way to fix this that I've been doing is taking a 90 right out of the expansion valve and turning bending the distributor down and then piping the 90 into it. So the distributor's pointed down so they all evenly flow.
And that's the way they should be. For the sake of space, they never do that. Like even on the bullseye ones, you'll have like 10 distributor tubes. You'll have 5 on the top, 5 on the bottom. The 5 on the top usually always go to that side of the coil, and the 5 on the bottom go to the other one.
It's always the side of the coil in the worst spot too to de-ice.
And they always have the freaking defrost termination sensor on this side. The side that never gets any freaking liquid. It's always on that freaking side.
Yep. 100%.
Which means like this doesn't show its rear head for, I don't know, 3 months until you have about 4 feet of ice on that side of the damn coil. So typically I'll do 2 things. One, play with the EPR, and I'll get to that in a second. And the other thing is I put the defrost termination on this side, because no matter what, you're always still going to get frost on this side. So if someone messes up with the program that you just made changes on, at least the defrost termination sensor will still be sensing the side of the coil where it gets all the ice all the time. So he sends me pressures. And so this was a room that was supposed to have a 25 degree SSD coil, and it was supposed to have a 35 degree box temperature. He sends me this picture, and I got 5 degrees saturated. I already know what's wrong, but I need him to go upstairs on the upstairs and let me know what's going on up there, because I needed some questions asked. So as you can see, this was in the middle of Indiana. This is back a couple months ago, but there was snow, it was raining. I think he said it was like 28 degrees outside or something like that. And you can see the suction pressure is just in the freaking toilet, and the discharge pressure or liquid pressure, I don't know where he was measuring off of, was 147. He had enough liquid in there. It wasn't flashing or anything, but he had a 2-fan condenser on there. So I had him pull one of the evaporator power supplies to kill one of the fans, and then the discharge pressure or liquid pressure started going up. If your compression ratio goes up, your more heat being generated goes up. And essentially the compressor thinks that it's smaller than what it is. So in essence, your discharge pressure goes up, because now you're creating more heat than you are actual BTU load. And so he was all hell bent. He's like, they sized it fine. So before I talk about this, what is the top temperature that it really gets up in Indiana?
100 probably.
Really?
Especially if you're south. Dude, Indy and southern Indiana gets pretty toasty. It was hitting 98 here for like 3 days straight up north. So out there, if he's south, I could see it getting that high.
So he sent me the sizes for what I did was I ran it for 100 degree day, right? Or 100. I did basically 120 degrees saturated condensing temperature for the compressor that was in there. He had a Z something 19. I don't want to put comments. And so I ran the numbers and saw the net refrigeration effect is basically what the capacity of the coil would need to be. And that's what he had. He had like 17,500. That's what the size of his coil was. But when I ran it when it was a 28 degree day out, you can see that now your net same compressor, just basically chilling down the temperature to 70 degree saturated, whatever the headmaster was going to set at. And then in essence, now you have 24,400 BTUs of compressor when you only have 17,500 BTUs worth of evaporator. It was sucking way more than what the expansion valve and the coil could put out. In turn, the suction pressure was in the toilet, and it was causing it to mess up the TD, which was causing the coil to be super oversized. So when he pulled one of the condenser fan motor power supplies, the pressure went up, and then the suction pressure came up instantly, and then everything was rocking and rolling. And so he told me the top it ever gets in that area of Indiana, and I don't know where he was at, but he told me it was getting up to top max temperature. I think he said like 85, maybe 90 at the max.
What?
No, that's what he said. I don't live there. I'm just going off what I was told.
I live by the lake, and that's probably the coolest it's gonna get.
Listen.
I mean, here's the deal, though. Like, I have been saying this for forever. Ever since they did the AWF and all this other crap they put on these condensing units,
yep, they
have not worked.
Yep.
Until they add in hot gas bypass.
Yeah. So what I did was I looked at, he sent me the condensing unit information. So I saw if it went one condenser unit down, it gave me a ZS15. And so I sized the same condenser for making a max of 90 degrees outside, and it was still putting out 17,500, exactly what he needed. And then what I did was next, I ran it at too many of these.
Let me ask you this. So I'm a big proponent on single units of having a slightly undersized unit.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Like instead of going the next size up or like trying to have some extra capacity, I am single units. I am a proponent of having a slightly undersized unit and letting the pull down be slightly longer.
That's it. That's it. Who cares if it takes a little bit longer? Because otherwise you're going to have these problems. So then I took that condensing unit with the one under compressor, basically from the 19 to 15. And you can see the net refrigeration effect is still higher than what the coil is. But guess what? You're not half a ton over, right? Now you're only like a quarter ton over.
Yeah.
Right?
Instead of running like a plus 10 SST or 5 SST, you maybe run like a plus 18.
Yeah. And then it'll still, and with the amount of subcooling that you'll get out of the condenser with how cold it is outside, that might offset the size of the valve. It will make the valve bigger. And we're going to get into that here in a minute. This is something that happens a lot on single systems. And what do guys usually do? Just put some go juice in there and just get that pressure up. And then all of a sudden now the thing is going off on high head because you just jammed so much refrigerant down that pipe. But so there's certain things you can do, like when it's on a rack, it's a little bit more, you can mitigate that a little bit. If it has a mechanical EPR, great. Then it's really not, it's a mute point at that point because you control that all the time. But as we were stating before, if you have a electronic EPR and if they don't have some sort of max opening percentage on there, usually when the thing comes out of defrost, it'll open up 100%, driving that suction pressure to whatever rack it's on, and potentially oversizing the coil for a little bit and causing a really high superheat. And that's what a lot of times what causes that feeding on the one side versus the other, like we explained. If the expansion valve isn't big enough, you're going to feed the path of least resistance, which once again it's usually always that side where the pipes actually enter. So I don't know what he ended up doing. I think he ended up just putting it was a 2-fan condenser coil. And so what I recommended that he do is just putting on what did I tell him to do? Put on oh my God. Just put on an ambient thermostat on the second condenser fan motor. Because if you have a condenser and it's sized for X ambient, if you have the availability to shut down one of the fans, do so, because now that coil, if it gets down to 60 degrees, now that condenser coil is double the size, which means it's going to bring the head pressure down to nothing. And then you're going to cause this issue where now you're basically you're loading up that compressor more to do more work because the head pressure is so freaking low. So there's that. What was I going to do? Oh yeah. So we're going to get into sizing. So this is please don't tell me that I don't have the one that says Fahrenheit, because now I got to do extra math. Kevin's going to get angry. Oh, there we go. Kevin's always angry, but we're going to have to be more angry because now we got to do the non-America numbers. So anyway, so we have the capacities for these are the pulse width valves. Let's do some regular refrigerant for right now. So if you have a coil that is for the one that we just saw where it was 13,000 BTUs or whatever, if you're using 20 degree coil for that unit, and then this right here is your delta P. This is your difference between your suction and your liquid pressure. You want to typically size this for the lowest pressure that the head pressure is going to get to, because the lower the delta P, the smaller the valve appears. So you don't want to size it for what you're doing in the summertime, because if the head pressure then drops, the valves are actually going to appear smaller. which means it isn't going to be able to do what it needs to do in the wintertime. It's going to be weird. You're going to have high superheat in the wintertime, and you're like, why? Because whoever sized it for whatever the pressures they were doing currently. So if you're doing a 20-degree coil with 448, 449, usually the suction pressure is about, 40 pounds? And so you could also assume that your head pressure, usually the fan or the holdback valve settings are like 70 degrees saturated, which is like 148 pounds. So you're talking like 110 pound delta P, right? So if you do a 20-degree coil and you do that 100-pound pressure drop across there, you could do with the SPW4, which would give you 1.03 tons. Let me zoom in here a little bit. Yeah, so 20-degree coil, SWP4 with a 100-pound pressure drop, that would give you 1.03 tons, which means it would be just about big enough for that unit. So this is what I was talking about as we get into the summer pressures. Kevin, give me a number for pressure that you're going to have on 449 when it's, 100 degrees outside.
250.
There you go. So 250. So that means 250 minus only 250. So 250 minus the 40, that gives you about a 210 pound pressure drop. So go with the 200 here. And so now the valve in the summertime is going to appear like it's 1.5 tons.
Today's episode is sponsored by the RefRushield RDP Series differential pressure monitors from Westermeyer Industries, now available for transcritical CO2 systems in addition to other common pressures and refrigerants. When the filter element of your coalescing oil separator is contaminated, it can hurt your system's performance and efficiency. But how do you know when it's time to replace that filter? Wait too long to replace, and you could end up with a nasty filter blowout. But replacing too often can be a waste of time and money. The answer is installing a differential pressure monitor. The RDP Series differential pressure monitors, including the new transcritical CO2 model, are available now from Westermeyer Industries. To find out more information, email sales@westermeyerin.com. That's WESTERMEYERIN.com.
So that's what I was saying. So if you size it for what you have currently, when it gets down to the winter pressures, it might not be big enough for what you're doing. So, because if you only need 1.5 tons, you're typically going to be like, oh, that's going to be too high for that. So you're going to step it down. And so if you step it down, you might have not a big enough valve for when the head pressure goes down even lower. So making sure that you size it for essentially your lowest delta P that's capable in the wintertime or fall time is going to be your best bet. Because like I said, if you size it for right now, in the summertime, the heat of summer, come wintertime, it's probably going to be undersized. There's also another factor in here that we need to take in effect, and is the refrigerant correction factor. So you have, let's just say you have an SPW, dyslexia sucks, SPW4, my God. And then you have the 100-pound pressure drop. What? Oh, I went too far. SPW, Jesus, tap dancing. SPW4 at 100-pound pressure drop gives you 1.03 tons.
Why couldn't you just pick something like a double A?
1.03. Shut your freaking mouth. I'm doing electronic expansion valves. Knock it off. So then we have 1.03 tons. So let's just say that rack has a subcooler on it. It's a medium temp rack. I don't know why it typically doesn't, but let's just say it's subcooled. And so now you have to decide what correction factor that you have. So this is your liquid temperature. So medium temp racks sometimes are subcooled down to 75 degrees, right? So so 449. And so we're picking a number between here. It looks like it's, I don't know, we could go like in the middle here. So what do you think? 1.2 times it by 1.2?
Yep.
The middle. So times 1.2 equals. So now that valve is 1.236 tons. How do we convert that to what we need to? Multiply it by what?
Times it by 12,000.
1.2 times 12,000 equals. So now we have 14,400 BTUs. So you can see the cooler the liquid, the bigger the valve appears.
Now, here's my rule of thumb on this.
Warning. The following stunts were performed by professionals. Do not try this at home.
I'm not looking at a valve and being like, I have a 2-ton load. I have a 1.75 ton valve that, with 50 degrees of liquid is now a 2-ton valve. That's the valve I'm going to choose. That is not the valve I'm going to choose. I'm going to choose the valve that's going to work without the subcooling, and I'm going to double check to make sure that it's not going to be grossly oversized with the subcooling. Because I want this thing to run if the subcooler goes down. I don't want to rely on the valve making temp and making superheat if the subcooler's down. So,
but you're still limited to your liquid size, though. No?
What do you mean?
You're still, typically when you have a subcooler, your liquid lines are going to be smaller than what they originally were supposed to.
Maybe.
Yeah. Typically, yes.
Depends.
Okay. So if it was originally designed for it.
Some customers won't run anything smaller than 5/8 liquid.
Oh, okay.
We have customers that like their spec is no small liquid line smaller than 5/8.
Mm-hmm.
In that circumstance, it doesn't matter. I am a firm believer of sizing it for the subcooler not working and making sure that the subcooler, with it being there, isn't oversized. It's not everybody's belief, but like it covers you. How many subcoolers have you seen valved off or have an issue and get valved off? I want it to still make temp without the subcooler. 50-50.
I don't like that because if humans are fallible, what's going to happen is you're going to have someone that's going to monkey with a valve. You know what I mean? And then cause an issue. Yeah, because what are they going to do? Oh, subcooler's not working. We're just going to open up that valve.
True, but I don't know. I see more issues with not sizing it that way. It's the subcooler to get shut off for the night, and it's like now there's 12 cases running warm.
Fix the subcooler. I
agree. In a perfect world, how many of these like subcoolers are the devil?
I don't know.
I just been like when I'm sizing valves, I've been double checking to make sure I'm not over and make sure I'm not under, because subcooler stops working. You get some weird liquid issue like the Costco's, for example, where the liquid just the subcooler works and it doesn't because it's way oversized.
Okay, so let me ask you a question then. So if you were sizing this, not that I need to put one of those warnings before we say this, but if you were going to size it, do you still go off the lowest delta P that it's going to do? Basically the lowest difference between the liquid and the
Correct.
You still would?
Yeah.
Okay, so
I double check it to make sure whatever my lowest would go to. So if my rack is going to run a 70 SST and I know it's not going any lower than that, then I'm going to size my expansion valves off that minus the whatever my CT is. If it's going to be 70, I'm going to size it off of that.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that's the thing. It's a numbers game.
But that's the equivalent of saying, hey, if the condenser fans stick on and the head pressure goes down to nothing, I'm just going to make the valve double the size because then it'll feed more and work.
If you want to go like the old school method, a CDS 9 is like a Sawzall version of a CDS valve. Like it could do it. It could do everything. Look how many cases they have like 8-foot case with a CDS 9 in it. It still works fine.
The CDS. I'm making a meme tomorrow.
She's got 9,000 steps. She'll be fine.
No,
or 6384, whatever. A CDS 9 is literally like
it's the Swiss Army knife of CDS valves. You can use it for anything. And how does it work? It just does.
It just does.
So
the first 300 steps get wore out.
Just quicken up the PID. We'll be fine. So this whole theory that we're talking about like holds true for other things as well. So if you have, I just talked about this the other week. You know, I had a buddy that was working on a CO2 case, and I was going to bring up the CO2. There we go. I was going to bring up the actual valve that he had on there. He had a Danfoss valve in there, but the problem with that is I'm not good at metric conversion. I'm just not.
Why is it in KW?
I don't know. Why can't they have a US manual? Because like I have a valve conversion thing where it actually took what Sporlan converted it was. And then, so I just usually convert it, and then I'm like, okay, that's okay, that's it goes to that port, and then I just figured it out that way. So anyway, so if you have a CO2 system and you're working on you mother of Christ. Jamie's just failing here today. So if you have a low temp case, right, and you have a 5-door something, was it N6 something or other, it's like 1,000 BTUs per door. And now you still have to figure, so 1,000 BTUs per door, that's 5 doors, that's 5,000 BTUs. So it's just a share. Let's make it 6, so it's easy half ton. So if we have a half ton, right, now we have to figure in for the delta P. So if we are running your suction pressure on a CO2 rack versus the transcritical, right? So let's just say your flash tank's at 520 and your suction for your low temp is at 220, just to make it easier for math. Basically, it's a 200-pound pressure drop, right? So then that means if we slide this thing over right here, 200-pound pressure drop, and we need a half ton, then that means technically an SPW, see that time I did it right, SPW1 would just about work, right? So I don't know, you would probably have to go up just a hair then, right? They'd probably go up to an SPW2. Yeah,
I would say yes, probably an SPFW2.
Okay. So then if we were to then take the coil and instead of running it at low temp, now we're going to decide to run it to medium temp. They wanted a dual temp case. So now the box temperature is going to be 30. So that means we need a saturated of 20. Well, we're maintaining minus 20. So now instead of a 10 degree TD of maintaining minus 20 to the box temp of negative 10, now it has to go all the way up to 30 degrees, which means now we're running what? Would that be a 40 degree TD at that point?
Yep. And this is why they all run like ass
on the dual temp one. So now that coil, instead of being a half ton, is now going to be basically 2 tons. So you would, in essence, have to put in an SPW4 in order to make it work. There's a workaround. You could pick the one that's in the middle, but then you run the risk of that pulse width valve short cycling like a bastard.
So I had a OEM do this to me on a group of cases with
they called that.
So they called I think it was like number 4 orifices. Mm-hmm. And somehow the rack got designed to some magic number that would never exist, like a plus 28 SST and like a plus 32 degrees saturation on the flash tank, mm-hmm. which is like no pressure drop.
Okay.
So you need a massively oversized valve.
Mm-hmm.
Rack OEM gets there. She designed for a plus 16.
So now you have a really higher pressure drop across the expansion valve.
It was so violent, the flood back from the expansion valve, that it would, before the core link could even react to look at the PID, in the 6 seconds, it was shoving so much liquid down the suction line that the entire rack was shaking.
So it's so if it's and I'm assuming that it's a Cussman case, right? Yeah. So typically those cases with the individual coils, those coils are typically like 2,900 BTUs. So you said originally, what was your delta? 400?
Originally would have been, so the 33 degree flash or 32 degree flash tank and a plus 28 SST. So not very much.
Like less than 100. So
yeah.
Wow. So like to get a quarter of a BTU, you'd have to have an SPW1. But then, because then they drove up the delta. What was the new delta?
The new delta was a plus 16 SST versus a plus 33.
So that's like 150 pounds difference.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it doubles the size of the valve almost.
No. Okay. So if it was less, okay, because it doesn't have a scaling that goes all the way down to 50. But yeah, essentially it would have been like 0.15 tons, and then it went all the way up to 0.37.
No, it was like 4 tons. These were Danfoss valves. So it was a 4-ton valve on a 3-foot coil or 4-foot coil.
It wasn't the itty bitty. I thought those are only usually 2,900 BTUs.
They are, but it had a 4-ton valve on it.
Oh, that's silly.
We went from a number 4 Danfoss to a number 1 Danfoss.
Damn.
Yes, it would hit, and then 30 seconds later, the rack would just wash out.
Is that the one where you called me and you're like, man, I've never seen a rack suction this white?
Yeah, it was literally it would literally run for a minute, and then it's just like flood back instantly.
Yeah, and typically, so there's no for the CO2. There's typically no liquid correction factor because whatever the flash tank is set for, that's what the temperature of that liquid's going to be because it's at a saturated state. There's no subcooling going on. Have you ever?
We've talked about that. Remember, we talked about that with Bob the one day about auxiliary subcoolers and how they're really not worth it.
Oh, for as far as CO2.
Yeah, but I seen a rack the other day with one.
Really?
It was piped to a single unit.
And it was subcooling. What was the set point on the? So what was the flash tank saturated, and what was
33, and it was bringing the liquid down to 25.
Really?
Yep. Little tiny 3-phase scroll unit.
So they actually, look, they do actually have it. So look, so if you were to go down to, this is where Bob was saying, because look, so if you have it at 33 and go down to even 30 to 20, that's nothing as far as a percentage. You don't get that much efficiency out of it. Okay.
The only reason they were doing it, I think they had some long line issues.
Oh, they were doing flashy by the time that it actually got to those real long cases.
Yep. That's where I'm on the thing right now. Like, I think a lot of the insulation specs are 1/2 inch on the liquids.
Should be
ain't enough. It needs to be 3/4.
Yeah.
The problem is once you start getting into heavier wall insulation with that stuff, it starts sagging.
Oh yeah, because what's the spec? Is it 8 foot for the hangers? Like
usually it's less. So we're having to do them every 4 foot on smaller pipe.
No, but typically, they're usually set for an 8 foot gap.
So yeah, it really depends on the bar joist.
Yeah.
Like usually, like a good rule of thumb is between bar joists.
Okay.
It depends where you are. Like bar joists are closer by us than they are by you.
Why?
Because of snow.
Snow. Damn it! Answer my own question before I.
Yeah, you're from Connecticut. So bar joists are just like they are in Chicago. Like they're closer. Like in Texas, they don't need bar joists at probably every 6-8 foot. They could probably go 10 feet.
They could, but I think they still do because that's where I was remembering the spec of like how far that the pipe spec is typically. But because you're using smaller pipe with CO2, you more potential for sagging.
Yeah, even like 3/8, I see 3/8, and I don't like when the guys use 3/8. I'd rather them just use half. Like if they're doing liquid lines, I'd rather just be half. Like it just sags. Like there's no good way to, unless you're tying it. Even with saddles, it sags.
It's like my aunt on the 4th of July, just sagging all over the place.
Yeah, that's one thing to be wary of, like making sure that it's not sagging. And I honestly think bumping up to 3/4 armo. Honestly, the armo is more than the pipe.
I've heard that. You
said it is literally more than the pipe.
That's freaking ridiculous.
1 inch armo, I think 1.125 pipe. The armo is more money.
Damn, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, we used to throw our shit in the garbage, like instead of sending it back to the shop. They would flip out if it went back to the shop because it takes up so much room. And like it was like cheap as shit.
Now it's not.
Yeah, now it's not. Now it all goes back to the shop, and it's like getting piecemealed because they won't take it back at the supply house unless it's a full box.
Damn petrochemical factories.
Petrochemical. Guys, we're gonna call it for tonight.
All right. We'll see you guys next time. Thanks.